This is History Myths and Myth-Conceptions. And today's myth-conception is: Brutus was a traitor. It is usually assumed in popular culture that Julius Caesar was a great man who was betrayed and murdered by clearly inferior human beings, most notably by Brutus. According to Dante's Inferno, Brutus is more or less comparable to Judas. That is why he is currently spending eternity in the ninth circle of hell, where Satan chews on him, and on his friend Cassius, the other prominent conspirator, and obviously on Judas. The problem here is actually a bit deeper than treason. Although Brutus became almost the archetype of a traitor, most of the time it is implied that he was also a flawed and useless man. But the real situation was much more complicated. The question of treason is quite debatable, although it is indeed possible to see Brutus in this light. And the question of inferiority of Brutus actually leaves much less room for debate. He was a person of an excellent moral character, unlike Julius Caesar. Now, it is usually quite counterproductive to label political figures as good or bad. In many cases, it obviously has a point, but in general, it just dumps down any serious discussion and portrays people as one-dimensional creatures. It is very good for propaganda and for poorly written fiction. This question probably deserves a separate video, because it is an actual problem. Any modern human will agree that indeed people are complicated and they are not entirely black or white. There's nothing to discuss there, we're all grown-ups. And then you change the topic to something very ideologically loaded, like World War II, and you see how everything degrades to cliches and grotesque oversimplifications. So when we are talking about someone like Caesar and Brutus, we must remember that we're dealing with complex human beings. We're all biased and we're all taking sides, which is normal, but we must at least be aware of that. Brutus was never a cardboard character, and neither was Caesar. And when people are talking about the treason of Brutus, they tend to ignore the crucial details. First of all, we must get one important thing out of the way. There were at least two people named Brutus involved in the conspiracy against Caesar. Marcus Junius Brutus is our guy. The other one was Decimus Junius Brutus Albinus, his relative. Decimus played a huge role in the assassination of Caesar, and he is the person you can label a traitor with much less effort. He was always loyal to Caesar and then basically backstabbed him. His relationship with Caesar was much more simple compared to the situation of Marcus Junius Brutus, which included switching sides, a certain amount of absolutely justifiable distrust, and a very, very complicated family situation. And it's about time to talk a little bit about the family of Brutus, Marcus Junius Brutus. Something which works of fiction like movies and TV series, including Rome, tend to ignore or simplify. We're dealing with essentially a Roman aristocracy. Things are very complicated here. They all know each other, and almost all of them are related to each other. Brutus was the son of Servilia, a half-sister of Cato the Younger, which means, sorry for saying obvious things, that Brutus was the nephew of Cato the Younger. Servilia was, let's put it this way, romantically involved with Julius Caesar for many years. Brutus knew Caesar for pretty much all of his life. Caesar was, let's put it this way again, a close friend of his family, or his mother's side of the family, because Caesar also was a primary political rival of Cato the Younger, and Cato just hated his guts. It is frequently emphasized that Caesar was something of a father figure for Brutus, or even his biological father, which is very, very unlikely. But this idea of a father figure is also not very likely. His father figure was probably Cato again. And what about his actual father? Well, he was killed when Brutus was just a kid, and the person responsible for his death was Pompey the Great. Brutus also was married twice. His second marriage was very successful. His wife Porcia, or Portia depending on how you pronounce names, was the daughter of, well, Cato again. So Cato was his father figure. Brutus worked for some time as Cato's assistant. Cato was his uncle and also his father-in-law. Cato also was a prominent Stoic, and later the embodiment of Roman Stoicism, the model of a Roman Stoic. Brutus obviously was a Stoic as well. What do you expect? Now that we know something about Brutus and his family, let's take a look at his political allegiance and the question of treason. His behavior during Caesar's civil war can be seen as slightly weird, because any behavior would be weird given the circumstances. If you side with Cato and Pompey, you kind of betray an old and close friend of your family. If you side with Caesar, you betray your role model and father figure. But also, if you side with Cato and Pompey, you kind of betray the memory of your actual father, because Pompey was responsible for his death. Which camp do you choose? Any choice can be labeled as a treason, even if you choose to retire from public life and live as a hermit. And now we are moving to the assassination of Julius Caesar. We can discuss the moral character of Brutus and his struggle against the tyranny of Caesar. But instead, we can also discuss something else. Caesar won the war. Cato ceased to be a Roman Stoic and instead became the Roman Stoic, and his death was a direct result of Caesar's actions. Imagine the impact of Cato's death on Brutus. Also, imagine the conversations he had with his wife, Cato's daughter. At some point, the casual greeting of Porcia was something like, "How was your day and why Caesar is still alive?" And she had a point. And Brutus understood it very well. So if you kill Caesar, it can be seen as a treason. If you don't kill Caesar, it can also be seen as a treason. On at least 5 different levels. You have to save the Republic, and you also have to avenge your role model, father figure, uncle, and father-in-law. What should you do? And once again, we're not even discussing the moral character of Brutus. And I'd like to repeat that he was a better human being than Caesar. And we are not discussing how capable he was. The civil war against Octavian and Mark Antony was not as one-sided as shown in some of the movies. It was actually pretty close.